So again, welcome to all of you to our second in our series, Women Who Stay, of Women at Work. Just a couple of reminders. We have 2 more weeks on Zoom of this particular series, so we look forward to those weeks. And then the week after that, 3 weeks from tonight, we will gather in person for those of you who are able to do that for an in-person conversation about faith and work, or spirituality of work. So it will give a lot of people the opportunity to tell their stories of their work life. So I also just wanted to mention, because I only learned this last week, that the Women Who Stay series, which are the initiative that we started I guess about 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, now has a mailing list of over 800. So it's very exciting when you consider that we started as kind of an in-person Bible study, right? And so it's growing, and we reach people across the country and around the world, especially thanks to our friends in Australia and New Zealand, and also a former parishioner in London, and so on. So we're happy for all of your participation. So this evening, after we begin with prayer, I'm going to begin by having a conversation first with Maury for about 15 minutes or so, but even during that time, feel free to put questions or comments in the chat. We're going to leave the chat visible tonight to try to kind of inspire people to add more, but Ashley and I will monitor that. And then Ashley will speak with Kitty after that. And then the last half of the evening will be an opportunity for everybody to chime in and ask questions or make comments. Actually, I'm going to share my screen with the prayer and ask you to pray the prayer, because I need to go deal with this dog, and I'll be back. I'm sorry.
All right, so if everyone will just take a moment. I think we mentioned that we asked some of our participants to share their favorite prayers, and this was provided by Maury. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So it's my, oh, I'm so sorry. This dog is being a real pistol tonight. It is really my honor to introduce Maury Devine, who I think was among the first 10 people that I met at Holy Trinity when I came 20 some years ago. So it's a special delight to have her with us this evening. I'm going to give you a little background, a little bio sketch of Maury, and I'm also going to put, because she's so accomplished in so many ways, that I'm going to omit one paragraph, but I'm going to just put it in the chat so you have a chance to read that as well. So Maury Devine is retired from ExxonMobil, as she served as an executive there. And she's a former fellow at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government's Balfour Center for Science and International Affairs. And she's currently a member of the board of directors of JBT Corporation and ConocoPhillips. She's held various positions with ExxonMobil Corporation, and she worked with Exxon from 1988 to 2000.
Mobile.
From 1996 to 2000, she was president and managing director of Mobil's Norwegian affiliate, engaged in the exploration and production of oil and gas in the North Sea and the Norwegian Sea. From 1994 to 1996, she served as the secretary of Mobil Corporation and was responsible for shareholder relations and governance issues affecting the corporation and its 750 affiliates and subsidiaries. 1990 to 94, Maury was responsible for Mobil's international government relations, with particular emphasis on Vietnam, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Russia. So before she went to Mobil in 1988, she served for 15 years in various U.S. federal government positions, including as assistant director of the White House Domestic Policy Staff, staff advisor in the American Embassy in Paris, and planning and operation positions in the Drug Enforcement Administration. She's currently a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Maury serves on the board of directors of Gonzaga College High School and the Foundation for Catholic Charities of Washington, D.C. She's a former board member of Georgetown Visitation, the Washington Jesuit Academy, and the Washington School for Girls. And Maury, I loved this note at the end of your bio sketch that you were awarded the Norwegian Order of Merit by King Harold V. That's really cool.
That's cool. My sister called me in and said, "Do I have to call you sir?" And my father, when he heard about it, he said, you know, he was lieutenant in the Navy in World War II. He said, "I think you outrank me." I said, "That will never happen."
Yeah.
So
That's
anyway,
wonderful.
great. Thank you.
And I put a few more details of Maury's background
Very kind.
in the chat. So Maury, first I want to just ask you a little bit about, you're a Catholic since birth, right? Or since baptism in infancy, right?
Mhm.
Who have been particularly influential to you in your own kind of faith journey, your development in the faith, and maybe particularly looking at women in your life of influence too in that way?
Thank you. Well, first of all, Anne, thank you. And Ashley, thank you for all you've done for the women who stay and all you've done for Holy Trinity. There are many people on this call that are doing great work for Trinity and for the church and for the world. And whether it's in Trinity, whether you're a Eucharistic minister, a lector, or anybody that works in the school, and the parish staff, you're doing great work and making a difference. So thank you for that. A Catholic formation, I am a product of 16 years of Catholic education. I went to Ursuline Academy, which was here in Bethesda, in the early years, and then a Pensionnat de Jeunes Filles, a French school, which the sisters of an unknown order, which to this day I've never figured out what order it was. But for 3 years I was there at a French school when my father was assigned to the UN. And then Chestnut Hill College, which was founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph in Philadelphia. I come from a family, I'm the oldest of 6, and all of us have had some kind of touch with Jesuit education. 2 of my brothers graduated from Prep and 1 from Loyola of Baltimore. And then my sister has a PhD for microbiology here at Georgetown. The Jesuits have been important to us. I've been a member of the parish for 37 years. I kept it up even when I was traveling or assigned abroad, and feel very good about what the Jesuits have taught me about Ignatian spirituality and that most important virtue, gratitude. As I've said to you, I was born into a large Boston family. We are devoutly Catholic, fiercely patriotic, very proud of our Irish heritage, and staunchly democratic. There are some of us that have gone astray and voted Republican, but we are staunchly Democrats. So that kind of gives you the context. My father was friends with President Kennedy. President Kennedy was my father's substitute on the Harvard football team. And my grandmother, Caroline Driscoll, and Rose Kennedy were friends and helped establish a philanthropic organization to help the Irish Catholics in Boston who were being excluded. I was one of those individuals who was shaped by John F. Kennedy's remarks, no doubt about it. And let me take you back to a date. Let me see if I can get this view right. Speaker view, it's not coming up, but well. I was one of those people who was shaped by John F. Kennedy's remarks. And I'm going to take you back to January 20th, 1961. I had just turned 10 the day before. My brother Chip and I were in the U.S. Department of Justice, where both my mother and father were career attorneys. And we were sequestered in an office in the department so that we could watch the ceremonies on the black and white TV, and we could watch the parade from Dad's window. Mom and Dad were up on the Capitol for the swearing in, but we were sequestered in his office. Dad had just taken a position to be confidential assistant to then Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. It was a snowy day. If any of you remember that in Washington or watching it on that black and white TV. It was an inspiring day for many, but particularly for our family. We can all sort of recall the great quote of "Ask not what you can do for your country, but ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." But if you take the end of the remarks, and that is what I remember, and let me read it, give you just what it sounds like. He finishes to give it the famous quote. And he says, "Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." God's work must truly be our own. Words matter. It meant a great deal to me. In the late 60s and 70s, I took the Kennedy message to mean marching. I marched for everything. I marched for civil rights. I marched for human rights. I marched for women's rights. I marched against the Vietnam War. At one point, I was probably 19, 20. My father said to me, "Are you just going to deplore things? Or are you going to do something about it?" I paused. I looked at him and said, "I'm going to do something about it." So I went up to the Hill and joined the staff of Senator Edmund Muskie from Maine. And shortly thereafter, his campaign, though unsuccessful, for the campaign for the presidency. And that took my life into public service. I joined the Department of Justice in a low entry job, et cetera, and moved up, became an intelligence analyst, served in the American Embassy in Paris for 3 years, and eventually the Carter administration, and then came back into government or federal career service again. Those were interesting times. They were very productive. They were challenging times for government service. So that is my first phase of government service. That's the first phase of my life after formation. The second phase was my years in international business, and Anne has given you lots of jobs there that I did. And then the final phase is governance in both corporate governance and in nonprofit governance. And that's been helpful to me, be on boards to make sure that we have sound succession plans, that we've got sound financial controls, and that we have a good strategy going forward. And that applies to both corporations and nonprofits. So that's kind of obviously my father was a great influence on me. My mother was too. She was a career attorney and they both raised 6 children. So, and very difficult. I used to ask her, I said, "Mom, how many other women were in the U.S. Justice Department when you were there?" And she goes, "Well, there were 5 women attorneys." And that's what she did. So she was a great model to my sister and myself. My sister is assistant director of the at NIH in stroke and neurological disorders. Great models, and a very compassionate and helpful individual. So, does that answer your question, Anne?
Yeah, thank you, Maury. And your response kind of already pointed in this direction, but if you could tell someone what are sort of the contours of being Catholic, right? What does it mean to you to be Catholic? And in particular, maybe what words would you use to describe your identity as a Catholic woman?
I think that when you look at my Catholicism, it's heavily driven by Matthew 25, the Beatitudes that we heard yesterday at Mass. Father, some of you may have read or been at Father Earl's 5:30 Mass. He gave a modern translation and a modern version of the Beatitudes. It was really well done. It was, and it gives you those kinds of. So Matthew 25 is it. I don't just take the direct work of Catholic thinking, because I think you can also take it from other parts. We look at the great quotes. I'm a big one for quotes. I love having some kind of guidance like that. But I was always kept one quote that Hubert Humphrey had it, FDR had it in his second inaugural. Both talked about how future generations will judge us. And it's how we treat those in the dawn of life, our children, those how we treat that are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those in the shadows of life, are sick, are needy, are disabled, are poor. So, even Albert Einstein talked about only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. I thought that he was raised Jewish, but he's obviously been late influenced by the Jesuits. It's an extraordinary kind of, so those are the governing things. Put yourself into people's shoes. That's one of the things that we hear all the time. And walk in their shoes, see what it is, listen to them. I would encourage, I know many of you are doing this good work, but work with young people, particularly if you're older. Work with young people. They need more help and guidance than you can imagine. I've been very fortunate to have worked with the kids at the Washington School for Girls, the boys' school, the Washington Jesuit Academy. These are wonderfully inspiring young people who just need a little help. And does that sort of answer your question, Anne?
And actually, when you say that, it was actually one of our young members of our core planning group that even suggested this topic, because as a young professional woman, she was wanting role models, right? How do professional women and just all women who work, how do they navigate all of the challenges of workplaces? Maury, when you think about your life and your career, your vocation, what strikes you in terms of your evolution of what you've been able to bring to your workplaces as a person of faith? Because, we don't just sort of start off in our young years as we've got this all managed, right? Because faith evolves just as we evolve as working people. So what kind of stands out for you in terms of what have you been able to bring to your workplace that you feel is rooted in your own faith?
I think three things. One is that sense of gratitude, to thank people. We don't thank people enough. When my mother was dying, she was in her 90s, and she's my second mother. My first mother died when I was 4. I feel, and my father remarried. He was this career attorney at Justice, and a wonderful woman. And I said when she was dying, or last week, she was in hospice, and I went to her every day and thanked her for something. And, I said, Mom, did you pay the tuition at Ursuline Academy for my brother Chip and myself before you married Dad? Well, your dad had a lot of medical bills from your mom. And So I yesed, and I said, well, thanks for doing that. You made a good investment, but thanks for doing that.
Mhm.
And she said to me, how'd you figure that out? And I said, you're a pack rat. I'm going over your records and you have a canceled checkbook. So she also, I thanked her also for, I said, Mom, remember when I was 7.5 when you married Dad? And I said, Mom, remember that time I got over the calling Miss Walsh and Miss Devine, became Mrs. Devine. And people would say, look at us both and said, young lady, you look just like your mom. And your mom would turn to me and she'd wink and I'd wink back. I said, thanks for winking. Because all kids want to be accepted. So put yourself in those shoes. Put yourself in how kids feel. These, at the Washington Jesuit Academy, I want to be attentive to time because I want to hear Kitty. But the Washington Jesuit Academy boys, I was at a luncheon for them, and I said, Devine, what's your favorite class? He goes, oh, Mrs. Devine, it's reading. I said, oh, that's great. He said, no, it's better than great. I said, okay, Devine, why is it better than great? He goes, Mr. Wasserman reads to us the first 15 minutes of every class. I said, that is great. No, it's better than great. I said, okay, Devine, why is it better than great? Nobody's ever read to me. I said, you're right, Devine. It is better than great. That's what you can do when you see these kids. So, and you see them at the girls' school, at all of them. So reach out to them. So those are the.
So, Maury, I can only imagine in all of your various workplaces in international business and the government that you certainly have faced challenges along the way. Perhaps some challenges whether strategy, policy, protocols, next steps, coworkers, etc., are wanting to move in direction that is incongruous with what you believe to be right, again, informed by your own faith. What do you do? And again,
well, let me give
how
you
perhaps has that evolved for you as well? Because I remember when I was a young lawyer, I wasn't going to speak up to people, right? So it just sort of evolves over time. So can you give us a couple of examples of challenges like that?
Yeah, two. One was the government, and in both cases, I walked away and had to walk away. And hopefully, you fully understand. Some people may not. You've got home commitments, you got family, you cannot walk away from it. But I did. In 1986, when I left the Department of Justice, the Reagan administration wanted to privatize the prison system, build more prisons, which means if you build more prisons and you're privatized, you need to grow, you need to fill the prisons, and you filled them with young Black men, which was going to turn out to be the case. They changed the sentencing guidelines, and the sentencing guidelines were very harsh on young Black men. I decided I couldn't change it from within. I'm an institutionalist. I change things from within. And I prefer that. I like large, complex organizations. But in that case, I said, 35, I need to move on, and left government service with the hopes. I thought I could run for office and thought of Connie Morella's seat, but she was so well liked in Montgomery County that was not an option. And my timing was not right. Chris Van Hollen came in 10 years later, and it was he's doing great work. The second one is in Statoil. When I was in Norway, the Norwegian oil company is Statoil, now called Equinor. And I had left Norway. They said, would you join the board of Statoil? I was thrilled. Publicly traded company. It provides most of the money for the sovereign wealth fund of Norway, which is now 1.5 trillion. This is great. I'll go back to Norway. I'll join their board. And they said, we'll send the package to you. We hear you're in London. I said, yes, that's it. We'll send you the package for the first meeting. Why don't you fly up to Oslo for the first meeting? I opened the package and it says, Statoil's investment in Iran. I go, Statoil's investments in Iran? What are you, crazy? What why would they be investing in Iran? We have put it down as a terrorist organization. So they said, you can set up a Chinese wall and you can excuse yourself from voting on the decision to invest in Iran. I said, I can't do that. I've lived my life. Again, my guiding light of my father said, I'd like you to live your life as if you would be fine with anything on the front page of the New York Times. And so I went, oh, how's this going to play? I go before a Senate committee and they say, Ms. Devine, the State Department thinks Iran is a terrorist country. Why do you think it's not a terrorist country? Not a good answer. Second question, you recused yourself from the decision to invest in Iran, and yet you approved the overall budget for Statoil, which has Iran in it. How do you justify that? There's no good answer. So I said, I will step down. Doesn't have to be public. You can say it's for personal reasons, but I want this letter to be on file, that it is the spirit of the law that guides me, not just the letter. I was terrible. I would have loved to have served, 8 to 10 years on a board in Norway, which I love the people there, etc. In the end, it was probably a very wise decision because 10 months later, they were charged with SEC violations and all kinds of other things. The board had to be removed, and top 2 of the leadership were charged with crimes. So those are 2 things that you. Now I had the flexibility, and I'm very aware that I could leave, and I had the financial means to be able to do it. I had, I could do that. So I fully understand that's when you start to get real challenges.
Right. Yeah, maybe we can swing back around to some of those pieces later. I'm conscious of time.
Same here.
I don't want to overlook Barbara Ward's question. I think we can swing back around to that too, because maybe Kitty will share similar stories. So Ashley, why don't you take it from here, and then we'll come back and talk with both of them.
Great. Thanks, Maury.
Thank you.
Kathleen Wach, who goes by Kitty, has deep connections to Holy Trinity. I'm thrilled to introduce her tonight because I've had the pleasure of getting to know her over the past couple of years through her work in social justice, specifically in racial justice and in immigration work. Her grandparents settled in Georgetown in the 1940s and were members of Epiphany Parish on Dumbarton Street. Kitty's parents were married at Epiphany in 1960. She is a graduate of Holy Cross College and Georgetown University Law School. She spent a year in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps following college. Kitty and her husband, Peter Ellsworth, were married at the former St. Aloysius Parish at Gonzaga's North Capitol Street campus and sent their 5 children to Holy Trinity School. The children are all grown, and the family recently celebrated the wedding of 1 son and the addition of a daughter-in-law. Kitty has spent her legal career in Washington, D.C. Beginning as a staff attorney for the Neighborhood Legal Services Program in Anacostia, she represented people in housing cases, child custody disputes, and Social Security disability appeals. After a further stint at DC Legal Aid Society, continuing the same poverty law focus, she spent 4 years as a staff attorney in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. For the last 24 years, Kitty has served as the pro bono counsel for a DC law firm, Miller and Chevalier, coordinating the firm's pro bono practice. She is a past board member of the International Association of Pro Bono Counsel, past chair of the Judicial Conference's Standing Committee on Pro Bono Legal Services, and currently serves on the board of the law firm Anti-Racism Alliance. She also serves on the Association of Christian Faithful at Georgetown Visitation School and as a spiritual director here at Holy Trinity's Ignatian Spirituality Ministry. Welcome, Kitty. So we'll start the same way we've started. If you could begin telling us about your Catholic formation. We know you have a Catholic family and what your influences have been during your formation.
Thank you, Ashley. The formation question is such an interesting one, and it's ongoing. I don't think I had one formation period which stopped. In my family was very Catholic. Both my parents had brothers who were priests. My father also had 2 sisters who were nuns. And actually, it was those 2 aunts of my father's that were very important to me growing up. And they remained important to me. One of them has just died this past year. And the other one, fortunately for me, is still with us, although she's 94 right now. So my aunts have been important to me in terms of Catholic formation. They were both They're both joyful women and women of tremendously deep faith. I don't know who I would be without them. But in addition to that, Jesuits have been important to me. Holy Cross was a place where I really got introduced to Jesuit spirituality. I had a course in sacramental theology by Bernard Cook, who was a former Jesuit. He was on the faculty, not the same Bernard Cook we have here at Holy Trinity, but up at Holy Cross on the faculty at that time. And that was a transformative experience for me. More recently, being involved with visitation as I am right now, and the immersion that I've been fortunate to be able to do into Salesian spirituality has been really important to me. St. Francis de Sales was educated by Jesuits, and there's a wonderful symmetry between the spirituality that St. Francis and Saint James Chantal put together and the Jesuits.
Thank you. Was there ever a time that you stepped away from the Catholic Church? And if so, what led you back?
Not there, it's since I went to Holy Cross and since I was in JVC, I've really loved being part of the Catholic community. And if anyone is familiar with the JVC, it's a wonderful kind of a fraternity of people that have lived that service. And when I returned to DC, I don't think I would have gone to Mass regularly ordinarily, but there was a really vibrant community at St. Aloysius. Unfortunately, that parish is no longer extant, but it was a great meeting place for former JVs and really wonderful liturgies. So no, there was not a time as an adult that I really stepped away from the church. There's been many, many times that I've been unhappy with what the institutional church is saying and doing, but I never felt like wanting to leave it myself as an adult.
Are there values or way of being that has taken shape because you are immersed in the Catholic tradition?
I think there are. The ability to go slow and to think things through beyond a surface level, I see as coming from the Catholic contemplative viewpoint, and also Salesian spirituality and the emphasis on humility and gentleness has a lot to do with this. These virtues are countercultural, and they are, I think, in that sense, uniquely Catholic, and they inform a lot of the other work I do, a lot of the thinking through problems and analysis. At least I hope they inform.
Can you share a little bit about how social justice has called to you? I mean, your whole career has been really in that vein of service to others. And I'm just curious about how that's been kind of life fulfilling to you, and how do you not get burnt out, and what has kept you in this field?
The idea of service as a pivot for my life really, or as a focus, really became clear to me when I was in JVC. I realized that it was so life-giving and so intense to be working with people in a direct way and to be able to help people. And I wanted to do that. I actually thought about becoming a social worker. I have always liked being able to work directly with people. When I went to law school, there's of course a lot of people that go to law school with the idea of using their law degree to bring justice and to do things that are for, that are like the Atticus Finch model of legal practice. But many people also get kind of seduced by the idea of working for large corporations. To me, it always seemed much more rewarding and much more important, really, to work with the actual person. I spent a summer working for the Public Defender Service. That was another pivotal thing for me. A completely secular organization. In fact, in many ways, kind of a profane organization, at least at that time. But really an organization devoted to service, devoted to seeing the individual people, even the most discarded people, as worthy of fighting for hard. That focus on the individual and the desire to be right with the person, to stand right next to them in court. That's an awesome feeling, to be right with somebody and think, I will do what I can to make sure this person gets treated fairly. that role has always been very attractive to me. I've also particularly always had a real connection to people that are left out of society. When I was in law school, I was involved in a clinical program that taught legal concepts in the jail. I taught a course, I loved it, so I did it every semester. I taught a course in the DC jail and to the women's unit. And then also at that time, the Lorton prison was still in operation. And I taught at Lorton. And to meet people that are serving sentences, to work with them and to connect with their humanity was very rewarding to me, and I think very Christian. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, terrific. I mean, are there, I think this work is challenging, it's rewarding, but it's also challenging. Are there prayer practices or other prayers that sustain you or support you in the highs and lows of this work?
Praying at all, which I didn't do for many years of my life. For many years of my life, my praying was kind of more like a 911 than anything else. But so I started praying with my children when they were little, and we would pray regularly. Listening to children pray is a beautiful experience. And then I've only developed any kind of a routine of regular prayer as an adult, late in my life. And to do that allows me to slow down, as I was referencing earlier, and see things below the surface, and to connect with the humanity of each person. People can be very, very difficult, and that doesn't change whether they're rich or poor. But it prevents, I think, being able to see the humanity in each person and be able to, I tell myself, God loves this person with the same intense love that I know God has for me. And that helps me to not get burned out and helps me to deal with difficult situations.
I'm going to ask kind of a similar question to that Maury answered about if there ever been times in your work life experience where you had to step away or that you were challenged because of your faith.
It's interesting. My identity, as I've been at my current job for a long time, for 24 years. I never thought I would remain that long, but it's been a wonderful place to work. And when I first started this job, it was the first time in my life that I was working part-time. And at that time we had 4 little kids. So it was really nice to be able to work part-time. So I've been there a long time. As I look back over it, being Catholic was not something that I was comfortable sharing necessarily with my colleagues in the beginning, but over time I have, and now I'm well known in the office as being Catholic, and I'm comfortable with that. In fact, I'm fine with that. And most of the time I'm happy to present. I try to present what I hope is an authentic view of Catholicism. There are some times where, so last summer, in June, I was away from the office. The Dobbs decision came down, and many of the young women in my office were really upset. They were, and I shouldn't just say the women. Many of the people at my office were angry and upset. And I was away for 8 days. I was on a silent retreat. But I had a colleague at the office and she's a very old friend, and she's not Catholic, but she called me. She was upset herself, and she said, this decision has come down. People are really upset. They're wondering what we can do as a firm, what we can do as a pro bono program, and they're wondering where your loyalties are, because they know that you're Catholic, and they don't know whether you're going to be behind this or not, or are you going to want to not do anything. So she and I worked out a strategy for what she could say to the associates at the office in my absence. And I came back and we had several meetings, and we figured out among ourselves the approach we would take. But it was that was the biggest challenge that I've faced, where my sense as a Catholic and the values that I have were most at odds with what people at my office were thinking. But we got through it. We chose things that we were all okay with, in terms of this is where we're going to put our efforts into, and this is what we're going to work on.
I think that's a good segue back to Barbara's question, and we'll invite Maury to contribute. do you believe that religion can and should influence leadership or influence decisions in business and law?
I definitely do. I don't think you can separate. I mean, maybe you could parse out what a person means by religion, but I don't, to the extent you have an identity, your religion is part of your identity. You can't separate out your own identity with the decisions you make as a leader in the business world or in the legal world. And in fact, they should inform those. And I think they do. And I heard what Maury said. She gave several beautiful examples of how her decisions she made were influenced by her religion. And I hope I have also done that. But it's tiny decisions. It's whether whether you take a phone call from a client who calls you too often and you really don't want to talk to them. And it's all kinds of other things like that. And it can be heartbreaking, as you know yourself, Ashley, from working with the migrants in our program here. It can be really heartbreaking to invest yourself into people who have difficult lives, and their suffering then becomes part of your suffering.
Maury, do you want to elaborate?
I agree with Kitty, and but I also think that your Catholic faith has to be the broad, inclusive Catholic faith, and then you can influence political leaders and government leaders. But it can't be a narrow view of Catholicism, a really exclusive view of Catholicism. I'm just as a minor note on this. I'm a student of languages. In the UN in 1945, they have two languages, French and English. French expected them to be the dominant language. French is an excluding language, and it is dying worldwide. People are not using it. English is an acquisitive language. It acquires words. So you have delicatessen and hors d'oeuvres and siesta. English makes everything theirs. And the Catholic Church says all are welcome. You should make everybody belong to that church. Once a church starts to become exclusive and not grow, it dies. And that's a concern that I have for the Catholic Church, is that it's not a case of Trinity. Everybody's welcome. And we want everybody to participate. But once a Catholic Church gets really constrictive and narrow focus and excludes people, for a long time, the Catholic Church excluded interracial marriage. For a long time, they've excluded divorced Catholics. We've changed, but we cannot let that happen again. So that's when I say, does your role as a Catholic play, as long as it's an inclusive Catholic Church? And that goes into the question of abortion, and I probably shouldn't direct it at this time, but Kitty, I thought you had a good answers though, so.
Go ahead.
I totally agree with everything Maury said, and there's a sense of particularly during the last administration, there was lots of, it seemed like Christianity was being taken a different direction. And I didn't say this, somebody else I know said this, but I really resonated with it. I wanted to reclaim Christianity and reclaim Catholicism for what I think it truly should be, which is inclusive and welcoming. And I love that model that Pope Francis has used, the field hospital. Mm-hmm. I think that's who we need to be.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yeah, thanks. I hope that answered Barbara. She had sent me a kind of a similar question after the education talk last week. So Barbara, if we didn't hit it, speak up or send another chat. So go ahead and please, those are kind of the main questions I had for Kitty.
Hi,
and
There's Barbara.
Go ahead, Barbara.
You know, I've listened to the examples that both of the women have given this evening, and in fact, I am a lawyer. So, and I have practiced both in the government for the Department of Justice, as well as was a partner in a major firm. And it seems to me that many of the decisions that they have faced, they've made decisions which were not necessarily Catholic, but which were reflected more of a social conscience. You know, I remember one time when I was at the Department of Justice, and it was my boss arrived at my door, and he stood at the door because he was afraid to come in. And he said, "We have this case in San Francisco where where the government has detained people who are wearing 'We Support Gay Rights,' and they want to exclude these people from entering in the country on the grounds that they're probably homosexual." And I looked at him and I said, "Go away, Denny." Now, the Catholic Church is not especially pro gay rights, whatever the Pope says, and however we all say, come to church and so forth. We're not. But in my soul, or in my being, I was unwilling to do that. I don't think that that was a Catholic informed decision. And the Justice Department had, or at least the Civil Division, where I spent on and off a great many years of my career, had a viewpoint that if you could not, for whatever reason, defend a position of the government, you did not have to take the case. You could pass it off to somebody else. And I don't think we can just say that every good decision we make that is conscience bound for whatever reason is because we're a Catholic. I think that is exclusive, and it narrows us down, and it fails to acknowledge that my Jewish colleagues, my Muslim colleagues, my atheistic colleagues have many of the same sensibilities that I have. And we are a country that is not a Christian country. We are not a Catholic country. And we should not be making decisions based on religion. We have to look at the law. We are a country of laws, and we need to be making the decisions based on laws. I become enraged when I hear these evangelicals saying we have to become a Christian nation again. That to me is antithetical to who we are as a country.
And Barbara,
Thank you,
I would
Barbara.
argue that what you've just said is because of that Catholic upbringing. It's a social conscience that you have. I couldn't agree more with you. I think you are absolutely right, and it's a concern I have on the abortion issue. The Jewish people do not believe that is conception at birth.
That's right.
And I should not be imposing my views on them. So couldn't agree more with you. I think the right to life issue is so narrowly focused on the unborn child, but those kids at Parkland, those kids in Newtown, they have a right to life. Those kids, the people at the synagogue, they have a right to life. Those people that were murdered in a concert in Nevada, they have a right to life. The homeless that we're finding and vets that have come back with mental health, they have a right to life. And that is a much broader view and inclusive. And that's what the Catholic Church has done, though. It has made mistakes. I'm the first one to believe that they've made mistakes, but they've done great things. They have raised educated people who have that sense to think of others. They have taught them. They've worked in hospitals. Nick Kristof of the New York Times has a wonderful piece about what the Catholic Church, you can criticize it for many of its faults, and it's got lots of them, as government has lots, as large corporations have lots, but they've done good work. And that's what we are part of. And you've got to sort of step back and say, okay, when am I crossing that line that's making us exclusive rather than inclusive?
No, I think you're right. We should not assign to ourselves, though, some specialness, because then we fail to acknowledge that I have many Jewish friends. It is a part of their religion to give back, to forgive. And we have to realize that exists in many religions, not just Catholicism.
Right. I
Kitty,
agree.
do you want to add anything? And then I want to ask Olivia's question.
I think that, no, the answer is, I agree with Barbara and Maury wholeheartedly.
Kitty, it's nice to have you.
Let's look at the question. Olivia, thank you for this question. She is someone who ministers to 500 plus young women at a Catholic high school and wants to ask about what commission or challenge that Maury and Kitty would have to the Gen Z about how they should best or most effectively bring their Catholic identity into the workplace. So how, Maury, you mentioned the reaching out to young people. How would you mentor or guide them in terms of what they bring into the workplace and how it's informed by their faith?
I'll make mine very short because I'd like to hear Kitty's, and we, Barbara and I kind of monopolize that a bit for good cause. I think young people should listen to each other, seek each other out, seize opportunities to make a difference in the world. The world needs them in a big way, and that's what. And Olivia, I've seen what you've done at Visitation, and I'm thrilled at the work that the Elysian Center has done, and you are making a difference with the wonderful women who graduate and leave Visitation in every year. So, Kitty.
Well, you get no disagreement from me because Olivia is one of my personal heroes. But this is the very serious question. This is really what it all comes down to. What do we tell the young people? How do we guide them? And I think that what Barbara said is very true. For me, and I think for many of us, being Catholic is a part of who we are. But there's also, of course, we don't think that's the only way to be. I think being people of faith is something that informs your life, regardless of the way the faith is articulated in your life. And I would want young people to be free to acknowledge that part of them. Maury, you had some wonderful quotes, but there's a quote that I love. Teilhard de Chardin said, "We are not human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And I think that's what I want our young people to recognize. The world is not about, it's not only what you can see and feel. There's something more at work here, and we're all sharing in the co-creative aspect of the world. And to bring that to your adult life and to your work, your life's work is an important thing to do.
Agreed.
Thank you both. If I could just piggyback on that really quickly, when I think about this Generation Z, or the college students that I see on a regular basis, when we think about women of that generation, how would you encourage or help them find meaning in being part of the Catholic tradition? Because many of them feel on the fence about that. Many of them dismiss Catholic teaching on particular issues that we've already kind of touched upon. So what would you say to encourage young women to stay engaged in the church, or convince them that the church needs them?
Kitty?
This is a very difficult question. I have two young adult daughters of my own. It's very difficult to present an argument as to why they should stay with an organization that appears to devalue them. But maybe it's my competitive nature. I don't want to give up the church to someone else. This is our church. And my aunts were very clear about this to me, even though they both grew up in an era of even more limitations than women have now. And we have a lot to offer the church. And even if the church doesn't fully recognize it, I want to stay and try to help the church be more open and more inclusive.
As I said before, I'm an institutionalist in that I think large organizations, the Catholic Church, the federal government, the US government, large academia, that you can have more change and more from within. And so I decided to stay in the Catholic Church. And then no doubt about it, I wrestled with it Like, come on, does this make sense? But when you look at the balance sheet and you look at what the Catholic Church has done for 2,000 years, and it is sustaining, that you've got to say, yes, this is something I want to be part of. They're doing good work. Holy Trinity is one of the great examples. And if you could bottle this and put it across the world, you would be great. But that is what that list of things that we're doing. I'm on the investment board of Catholic Charities, and I look at Catholic Charities and every day what they're doing, and I go, it's just extraordinary. The migrants in this country who've been helped by Catholic Charities across the country is extraordinary work. Catholic hospitals. It really, do I want to be part of a large organization that can affect change? I think we can change it from within. And I'm willing to kind of, many of you may know about the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown, headed by John Carr and now Kim Daniels. And Kim is over at the Vatican regularly. She's leading Georgetown's view of change and what needs to be done. And I think there are ways that, it's maybe not my nieces and nephews that are going to see that change, but maybe those grandchildren will. And I think it's worth staying with the church and helping it get there. I've seen we've got a few questions in the chat. Is that right?
Yep. There was one
Yeah.
for Kitty, and maybe this will be our last question, if that's okay with you,
And then we have
Anne.
a book recommendation too. Oh, we have
Okay.
more. So,
All right, well, just wave when you and Maury are tired, Kitty, and we'll wrap it up. But what approach do you and others take to draw young Catholic women to do pro bono legal work? Is it appealing to the new generation of attorneys?
I know we're at the end of time. I'll be very quick because it is appealing to young attorneys. I think really to all people. Some older attorneys are afraid of doing pro bono work because they're afraid of getting outside what they know. They want me to give them a case that's exactly in their practice, which is they don't like to try new things. But younger attorneys are willing to try new things, and it is very rewarding. As I was alluding to before, it's the personal contact that's rewarding, and it's the when you can bring your training and your experience to bear to help somebody is the most rewarding thing. So I feel very hopeful when I work with young lawyers and with young people in general. I feel hopeful.
And I'll just say one closing thing is I am not an attorney, although I was raised by attorneys and have lots of attorneys, and I took the fifth all through my youth. But bringing young people to do pro bono work or to get involved. We have 5 attorneys on the board of the Washington School for Girls. We have a number of the on the board at the Washington Jesuit Academy. They want to serve too, and they're just a wonderful addition to have because they're great models. We are bringing our first board member on who is a graduate of the Washington School for Girls, and she graduated from Howard Law and is a public defender in PG County. It's the first woman we're bringing on to the board at the Washington School for Girls. So look for those opportunities. If you have people out there that want to serve, just let me know, because I have some great organizations that are looking for that talent. So thank you, Ashley.
And I'll just do a quick
Kitty.
plug too, because if you haven't seen in the bulletin or in my e-letter, we are welcoming various organizations that have been recipients of the tithe in February and March. Some of the many organizations Maury's talked about, and some that are newer. And I hope that they will be in McKenna during the donut hour after both the 9 and 11:30. So if you are looking for, and a lot of them do work with young people, that's been an area that our tithe has supported for a long time. It's an invitation for you to kind of have one-on-one and see if there's a place for you to plug into. So I hope that you guys will stop by that coffee hour. Sorry, Anne, sorry to merge my worlds, but.
oh no, that's perfectly fine. I'm just, again, looking at the time, and I think we could go on maybe for another hour, but.
Well, I think we're continuing the conversation. So if we didn't
are.
get this question, I know the one that's in here, we can address it over the next 2 sessions too. So
Right. And hopefully, you know, if Maury and Kitty join us in the next couple of weeks, or again on that third week, 3 weeks from now, when we meet in person, that would be great. We can continue a lot of these conversations. So next week, we focus on, see Pilar. I saw Pilar, there she is. So we will welcome Pilar next week, along with Tezi, both of whom have wonderful international kind of experiences, and we look forward to hearing all about those. Any last comments? Pilar, you unmuted. Do you have anything you want to say tonight?
Oh, no.
You just muted yourself, Pilar.
I'm sorry. No, I am impressed, the presentation. So you ladies are raising the bar. But I think it's just about honest telling your experience. That's what it is. So looking forward to it. And thank you very much to Ashley and Anne for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Pilar.
Ashley, do you want to wrap up?
I think that's it. We're at 6:35. So I hope we'll see you next Monday. Thanks again, Maury and Kitty. I'm among your biggest fans, and we're grateful for everything that you do out in the world, but also at Holy Trinity. And it's wonderful to see all of you this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday too.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Maury. Thank you, Kitty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It was wonderful, inspiring. Thank you.